Hey guys, my name is Mang. I'm from Design Plus Code, and today I'm going to show you how to build a very simple app from scratch. And I'm going to show you some of the basic techniques that most designers, even if you don't have any experience doing design, this should be super useful for you. The first thing I want to show you is the ideation, meaning that what is the app that you're going to build? The first thing you want to do is to browse some ideas. Those are typically your most used app when you use iOS, when you use the App Store. What do you download? And typically, you want to imitate an app that you use yourself. So, for example, a weather app, a fitness app, or a health tracking app, or a Bitcoin app if you're into crypto. In terms of the ideation, use the most common app that most people use. Now, let's talk about UI patterns and inspiration. You should go to Dribbble because Dribbble is where all the best designers in the world, they meet and they build very cool experiments in terms of animations and basic UI. And also there's a website I'd like to use. It's called Mobbin. And in terms of UX, if you don't know what UX is, it's when you talk about the experience. Like, is it a sign up page? What is the pattern? Where should you put the button? What is the menu is going to look like? So, for example, you look at some of the popular apps such as Balance or Target or whatever, you're going to see the different categories of apps such as education. You're going to need to create an account, and then you search by patterns, category. For example, PayPal. What does it look like? What kind of screens that we have for PayPal? So here, in terms of UX, you have to be able to identify what are these patterns and what are the most common type of screens that we see of these apps. This, for example, is called a user onboarding screens. And a user onboarding is when you land on the app and it's explaining to you what this app is all about. For example, you can see here it has beautiful graphics and it has some text, a title, and some dots, and it shows you can log in, you can sign up. And this is super easy to design. I would probably start with this if you're a beginner because it allows for more creativity versus the in-app screen, such as entering a cell phone is typically more boring. So if you want to use your creativity, definitely onboarding is a pretty good pattern to start with. You can see Dharma. I don't really know this app, but you can see that you have a bunch of patterns and you can use your creativity. So honing in on what app you want to build, what screens you want to build, this is what I would do. And then getting more into the details, right? So what fonts should you use? If you're starting out, you should definitely use San Francisco because it's a system font. If you're building for Android, it should be Roboto. And if you want to be more adventurous, which I do not recommend if you have very little experience in UI design, for example, I would go with the safer route like Roboto, which is for Android, and Spline Sound, or something that is safer, something that is readable and easy to digest, such as Poppins, Montserrat, or you can search in Google for like top fonts for UI design. Typically, you're going to find a nice list of fonts that you should use that is recommended by most designers. And so that's what I would do because typography represents about 90% of every UI design. That's why the font is so important. Now let's go into more details. Apple Design Resource. If you're building an iOS app design, then you want to use something like a sketch library you want to download for iOS. You're going to have like basic patterns in terms of the iOS language. And you want to be consistent with the platform so that what you design is not completely different and respect the rules. So you want to learn also the iOS design guidelines. Okay. And of course, there's a lot of stuff that you're going to want to read, but the main thing you want to read about is visual design and colors. So colors, just pick whatever one of these colors. And then you want to go into maybe material if you want to go, but typical colors and typography are the two most important things that you need to learn as a beginner. That's it, right? You don't want to read the whole thing. You're going to get bored. You're going to sleep. You want to start very, very simple. And then once you have these resources, you can head to Figma and you're going to go to the community and you're going to start searching for some of these examples that you can explore and analyze. But most importantly, you should definitely start with the iOS 15 UI kit. And this is a great one that you should definitely download. And you're going to be able to look at all of the components that comes with it. The same way you can use the one by Apple, you can also get this one, which is created by the community, and it has every single detail to create that design that you want. Sure, you're a designer, you want to get more creative. This might be a little bit too boring and too normal, but when you do UI design, you have to understand that there's two facets of it, the creative part and the UX part. And you have to master both. You can't just think, okay, let's go crazy and just do something with a ton of colors, a ton of artworks. It doesn't make any sense, because then you don't think about the functionality, you don't think about how it's going to affect the user experience, and what are the design systems, the fonts, the typography, the colors, and how do you ship that to engineers so that they understand what you're trying to achieve with your design. So that's why you need to look at this at a glance and apply that to your design. Some of the interesting things to look at is the color system. For example, we have the colors for dark mode and light mode, and the home screen, the typography. It's pretty important to understand these from a basic level. So the most three important is large title and then body. And then if you want to go smaller, then footnote or caption. And then if you want to have more variation to the title, then you have the title 1 to 3. In every single screen, you're going to see the body text and the large title. Those are the two most important things. And sometimes you have the variation with the bold and non-bold. So going back to the community, we're going to have a bunch of UI that you should look at. You can build a website or you can build an app. If you're starting out, I would suggest building an app, because an app is way easier. You have a smaller screen. It's more interesting. You can show it to people instead of asking them to go to your computer. It's also much easier with Swift UI to start an app and put that on your phone versus building a website and then dealing with a lot of platforms, unless you're using Code Sandbox. But then again, Code Sandbox is more for experimentation. Then you have to pay for services like Netlify and stuff like that. Making an app is a lot easier. You should download some of these screens, such as iOS design. So you can see we have a bunch of examples here. And you can see that it always starts with just one or two screens. Don't complicate things. Go with what excites you. Give yourself a deadline. Don't try to spend like a month, because you will lose hope. You will want to quit. You will want to give up. And that's not good. So you can see most of these designs, for anyone who has a bit of experience, take maybe maximum a day to design. And if you have more experience, this should take an hour or two. When it comes to UI design, you're not supposed to do most things from scratch. A UI designer job is not to create icons and backgrounds and illustrations from scratch. Their job is to mix things together so that the user experience makes sense, so that people can use it. And so that is the goal. That is what you should be focusing at. What is the typography? What are the colors for the branding? What is the menu looking like? And so that's basically it. Let's put that into practice. We're going to create a new design file. So let's take a look at one of the super simple screen. You have this one or this one. So onboarding screen and then main screen. Two screens, super simple. For someone who has a little bit more experience, it's probably take an hour. And for someone who has less experience, probably is going to make multiple iterations and probably take a day or two. But this is not, from an execution standpoint, this is not complicated. So you're going to create a screen and iPhone 13. And so you're going to want to go to this design kit. Why? Because we need some of the basic components, such as the tab bar, such as status bar, and home indicator. You're going to want to go to the theme library and publish this. And once I have that, I'm going to be able to go and enable that, such as this one. And I'm going to be able to search for the status bar. And I'm going to bring that to my UI design, adjust that. So now I have this, and then I also want the home indicator. And voila, right? So every screen is going to look like this from a base level. Now, what is it I'm gonna build? I don't know, meditate so that you feel less stress. I'm just inventing on the fly, and this is my title. Because it's iOS, you want to make it big enough, and typically you need to know what are the size. And back to the large title is you should know by heart, which is about 34. And also a title is typically bold or heavy. If you know some of the rules, is San Francisco Pro Display, and depending on the screen, sometimes you can afford to have bigger title. This 34 title is mostly for a typical screen with a navigation controller at the top, but otherwise you can get like into 50 even, like this. Super simple UI design. And then what else? You need illustrations. So illustrations, you can get it from a website like Shape, or you can also get it from the Figma community. Let's search for illustrations. We are so lucky because so many of these things are just free for us. And you can duplicate this, use one of these illustrations for the purpose of this example. Let's use this one and resize this. Boom. There you go. I have my onboarding screen, right? Now I just need my triple dots. I don't know if it's called dots, but I'm gonna duplicate this, right? So this one is not selected. I don't know. Boom. If this is lacking contrast, you can always add a little bit of colors. And you can make a little gradient, right? And you can switch the gradient. And now we have contrast for both light and dark. And if you want to feel more adventurous, which again, depending on your level of experience, you can add colors. Let's say you want to use one of the iOS colors. So let me go here, and I'm going to use maybe not something super flashy, but let's say this blue, which is super popular as a color in iOS. I can put that as a background, and then boom, I have something a little bit more colorful to contrast well. I can make it white, and the same for the label for the status bar. So we can choose light mode, dark mode, and that is all thanks to the UI kit. And so here, obviously we don't want to use gray, we want to use black or white, and we also want to use transparency so that it fits better against any color. So now we have something that looks a little bit better. Also, the spacing between these, we can use auto layout. So let me group these together. I'm going to add auto layout, and then I can control the spacing to, let's say, 12. And as you get better with UI design, you know the basics of spacing, such as using the 4-point grid or the 8-point grid. But again, you don't need to know those things as a beginner. Don't worry about it. So that's the first screen. The second screen is the browse screen, right? So if we go back to our inspiration, the first rule of designing is to not copy everything. So you're allowed to copy the UX. When I say the UX, like where things are placed, you're supposed to copy the UX because the tab bar is always at the bottom, the button is always at the top right or top left, and this is what an onboarding screen looks like. You're supposed to copy that. What you're not supposed to copy is exactly the same colors, the same text, the same illustration. You're not allowed to do that. So if I'm looking here, you can see that, okay, so I have a tab bar. It has, you know, a bunch of icons. I have the menu here, and I have my layout here. I have my button here. So let's do that. I'm going to remove this. And all I need to do is use one of the icons. So what do I use for icons? I can use, if I want to be consistent to iOS, I can use SF Symbols, which has so many icons for free by Apple. And so I can use Home, and I can copy this. And you need to make sure to use SF Pro, otherwise it's not going to work. So you're going to paste that, and you're going to use the font size to about 17, which is the body size, and boom. So this is typically your typical size icon, but you can make it bigger if you don't have a text, but I would definitely suggest to have the text. But let's say for the purpose of this demo, we don't have a text. We want to be a little bit more creative. We're gonna have about 3 icons like this, and we want to use auto layout. Boom, and it's consistently spaced 80. We want to center this, and then we're gonna have like different icons such as, let's say, grid. I don't know, something like this. Boom, and then search. There we go. Boom, my menu is there. You can have different colors for the background, black or white. You can also play with different shades of gray. So for example, you have a tab bar that is different colors, so you want to use visual hierarchy for that. You can have a background for your tab bar that is a little bit lighter. Make sure that it's very subtle, just like in real life. When you look at things, it's not like super contrasty. It's very subtle, the shadows, the tone. And I'm going to make that below, and I'm going to set it to about 5% or even 10% using white, or let's say 5%. There you go. You have the menu that has a little bit of accent. Here we can set the card for the content. We can also have the button. So the button, you should know a little bit about the rules, such as what is the size. So what I recommend is to look at the UI kit and measure things. Once you measure things, you're going to have a lot more confidence in terms of what is this going to look like in terms of size. So for example, this action button, which is supposed to take more space, is about 60 in terms of height, but this one is 42. Now the magic number for iOS is 44, and that is the average, because the size of the fingers, we want to be able to use it properly. So going back to my design, I'm going to set this to about 50 or 60, and I want to also have maybe some rounded corners, so 20. You can also use the iOS rounded corners. So this is the super ellipse, as we call them. You can set it to 60, and then you can use the same color, or you want to make it more poppy, depending on the importance of that button. And then you set a button, so for example, sign up, and depending on the size of the button, it's going to be more or less. You can also use the text styles. If you have used that as a library from iOS, you can use the text style from iOS. So you can use something like headline, or you can use title 3. And there you go. This is for the button, sign up for free. You can set it to centering. And also, you can set this as auto layout as well. And auto layout, what is cool about that is that you can change the size to always be consistent. So for example, if I want the padding to always be 10/10 from top to bottom, and if I want the size of the button to always have a consistent spacing, such as 10/30/30, then whenever I change the size of the text, it's gonna auto expand by default, and that's really cool. But in this case, my button is always going to be the same size. But I just wanted to show you that this is possible, and these are some of the cool techniques. You can also add drop shadows to the button, so like this, and you can use maybe a 20 and 10. So now you have a little bit of a glow, and now we have the content that you can use. You have different type of content that you can browse. So we can set it to 20. And here I'm going to set it to black for now. So this is my content, and I can have some illustrations to be part of that content. And then I'm going to make it bigger so that it fits for each of those cards. Like this. And then you have some title. When I'm short on time, I like to copy and paste, as you can see here. Don't worry, and it's always about how much time that you have in front of you. If the text is supposed to be a title or a body text, in this case, because it's part of a card, then it's going to be a title, and you want to use the bold version, so it's going to be title 1. You want to align it to the left, and something like this, and boom, I'm going to make this below. And then sometimes you have a second text, and now I'm going to use the body text, and it's not going to be bold. Typically, a body text is not bold, and so it's going to look like this. Also, you want to use different colors between the title. You can also use transparency, 70%, for example. Now we have a bit of a difference in hierarchy between the two, and it's going to look a little bit like this. You can group everything together. This is now a card. And once you have a card, you can really change that card the way you want. And so depending on your content, it's going to look more or less like this. And of course, you can use auto layout, so we don't end up with a problem like this. You can see with auto layout, I'm going to be able to do this. And then when it resizes, it's less problematic. You know, of the card, you can make it. It depends how many cards do you want to show. If you have more cards to show, maybe you want to use cards next to each other like this. And if you have less cards, then you want to make cards next to each other like this. This depends on all of those factors. This is definitely applying, so you can use a mask. So I'm going to use as a mask. The problem with the mask, it cannot have a background color, so I'm going to have to duplicate that and disable the mask and have two layers. One is a mask and one that is not. And now I have a perfectly sized card. So second card, and maybe I'm going to make these ones smaller cards. Don't want to get too much into the details. Those are the kind of things that you can work with, and you can definitely change the illustrations. And what is missing is the titles, right? And this time it's going to be like maybe title 3 and latest loads. There you go. And you don't have to use always the same color. And when the card is smaller, you can use a smaller title, such as this. It's going to fit a lot better. But you have to be consistent, right? So you can't just have a different structure every single card. So if this size for the text is 125, then this size for the text is also 125. So I can also use 70% opacity. And there you go. I'm going to put the tab bar to be in front. Make sure that I also have the background with me because I'm using opacity. It's not showing correctly, so I'm going to use the eyedropper. And there you go. You have 2 screens made in about 15 minutes. And you learn how to come from ideation to resources to studying and then creating something from scratch. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.